Good morning and welcome to the third Power to Your Business webinar, covering everything you need to know as you consider the switch to solar. Brought to you today by SolarSense. On-site renewable energy generation is helping thousands of UK businesses become more sustainable, reduce costs and achieve long-term energy security. But how do businesses get started or continue on this road to a sustainable future? My name is Dave Harries, and today's third webinar is entitled Solar from Start to Finish. In it, we are going to explore how installing solar can help you meet your ESG goals whilst also generating huge financial savings and opening up new markets. We'll be taking you through the process of installing solar step by step and hearing the first-hand experiences of organisations who have already taken the leap. We'll also be asking, what is the future of solar PV, and how could recent technological advances, such as smart batteries, help your business? Should you consider a solar carport, and how does the ROI compare to traditional rooftop installations? When should you contact the grid, and how do other energy-saving measures fit in? Joining me today, I have a panel of experts to help us answer these questions. Tim Cook is the founder of TDC Renewables. He is an independent commercial energy consultant with more than a decade of experience in the clean energy sector. He works with a wide range of businesses to deliver strategic direction for their ongoing energy needs. Ollie Fowler is Head of Technical and Project Delivery at SolarSense. He provides leadership and direction in the planning and delivery of all commercial and large-scale projects. Karen Friendship is Managing Director at Alderman Tooling, one of the Southwest's leading sheet metal fabricators, and she also chairs the Plymouth Manufacturers Group. SolarSense has recently installed a large-scale solar PV system to power the Alderman Tooling metal engineering facilities with clean energy. Jonathan Spencer Pickup is Director of Finance at King's School, Macclesfield, one of the UK's oldest and most distinguished independent schools. SolarSense has recently installed new solar panels on the Sports Centre at King's as part of a range of initiatives aimed at making the school a net zero energy user. And Ashley Webber is the owner and director of Balanced Energy, an energy consultancy focused on helping businesses to reduce carbon usage and adopt more sustainable practices. He has previously worked for a major energy supplier and has many years' experience within the consultancy sector. So, Ashley, as I introduced you last, let's come to you first. Many businesses are obviously attracted to solar for the environmental and indeed the financial benefits. But are there easier ways to reduce your carbon footprint and bring down energy costs?
First of all, thanks for the intro, Dave. Yeah, I think certainly there is. I think the first thing that we always say to client, no matter the size of the organization and whatever sector they're in, there's two kind of strands to sustainability and reducing your carbon emissions. First of all, that's data. I think data is key, understanding how to get your data and how you can reduce that data certainly within your utility consumptions, but also across your whole value chain. So in terms of, what you're buying, what you're using. So it's controlling your data, and then it's culture and behavior. I think they're the two key things that need to be in place before really any investment needs to be put out there. I think once you understand that, then you can then start to really make inroads in not only reducing your consumptions, but obviously then reducing your carbon impact.
So, given that, do you think there are some scenarios where you could manage without solar, or would you always suggest looking at solar?
I think definitely now solar is key. I think in terms of again, it's a commercially a no-brainer. I think the costs now make sense. I think the way energy prices are, I think yeah, the market is coming off after absolutely unprecedented highs. But I think we are going to see, this is going to level off now. I think electricity prices are going to be around, the low 20s, the high teens. So I think investing in your own clean renewable generation makes sense commercially. I think in terms of a sustainability narrative, again, it is the perfect way that you can demonstrate to stakeholders alongside your data and alongside everything else that you're doing in terms of culture and behavior, saying, look, we are investing in our own generation and we're producing our own clean energy. And I think that has a real strong message. I think also the other thing is future-proofing your business. I think the way we use electricity has to change in order to decarbonize the whole energy network, and the way that we're going to be balancing power. So I think the transition to be able to be more flexible in your energy usage is key to having your own assets on site. And I think, again, there'll be huge commercial advantages in that for people.
Yeah, thanks, Ashley. I'd like to turn to Jonathan Spencer Pickup now from the King's School. Jonathan, thank you very much for joining us today. Um, I'm interested in the fact that obviously, a school is a sort of slightly different thing from perhaps a typical business, but clearly you still have big energy usage. So I wonder, given what Ashley was just saying about data and preparation, all that sort of thing, how did you prepare and look at and measure, I suppose, usage before you decided to go down this road?
Yeah, thanks very much, Dave. My advice, and sort of echoes what Ashley was saying, would be to conduct the energy audit first. And it can be carried out by your own operations team. You don't need consultants involved necessarily at that stage. And it also gives them some ownership if they're going out getting the information together and starting to look at it. And it helped us prioritize where we used the most CO2. And it came out as use of electricity during the school day. We're lucky because we recently moved to very modern buildings, so our gas usage is low, even though that's the main primary heating source. And also things like vehicles, vans, and the minibuses, the fuel use was very low. So the governors who had a bit of a fad about electric vehicles, they all love their electric vehicles at the moment. I could demonstrate that investing there wouldn't actually give me the most most return. So it enabled us to agree and set priorities. And that's important in schools because we've always got demands on money and investment. And once we completed all of that work, it was clear that the solar was the right way to go for reducing our CO2 substantially over the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, that's very interesting what you say about the different types of energy usage, because one tends to I think sometimes for a layman like me, you kind of put it all in one bag and think, oh yes, a school or a business uses this much energy. But as you say, there are lots of different types, and you mentioned the cars and things there, and showing that they wouldn't, investing in a fleet of electric vehicles wouldn't necessarily save you money. But was it a difficult job to persuade your colleagues and the governors and and the people that make these decisions that this was a good road to go down?
No, I mean it fitted with our sort of sustainability and what we were talking to pupils about, and a lot of the subjects across our curriculum. So we were getting push from the pupils, and when we talked to people like our sort of our equivalent of the PTA, our Parent Teacher Association, they were very interested in it. It's a big issue on parents' minds in terms of how to make their own homes more sustainable, and how to make their children's world more sustainable. So we were pushing against an open door, really.
Yeah. I'd like to bring in Karen now, Karen Friendship from Alderman Tooling. Karen, thank you also for joining us today. You, as I said in the introduction, have had a big installation. I think we can see it behind you on your lovely backdrop, an amazing looking roof on the premises there. So tell us about your journey, particularly the start of it and how it all came about.
Yeah, thanks, Dave, and thanks for inviting us along. Yeah, I mean, our journey, obviously, we're in manufacturing, so we measure everything as much as we can. So I did a benchmark audit. Actually, I must have been bored. It was during COVID that I decided to start measuring our electricity, gas, pulling all the water bills together. So we did our benchmark year, so started measuring our scopes 1 and 2. Obviously, we then we were in a fixed tariff for quite some time, and we came out of that in about 2022, and it went from 10p to up to 30p. We had, I think everyone saw the spikes. Obviously, we're fearful of the future as well, where our energy was going to come from, whether we could, make sure that we could always have a supply, because if I have no power to the building, I have no work to give, our whole shop floor. So it was really important for us to be self-sufficient. started collecting data just off the energy bills. And then we started looking at the roof. Obviously, it's a big open space. It's a fairly flat roof, so it was pretty good for solar. We had already installed a solar array back in 2014 on a very, very small bit of the roof, just above my head here. It was only about 60 kilowatts, and that's when the FIT tariff was available. So obviously we were familiar with this already, but really wanted to exploit the better technology of the panels to use the space that we don't see to generate an income from us and sustain our energy consumption. We were tripling our bills as well from that 10p to 30p per kilowatt hour. Was obviously going to have a massive impact on our finances. So actually the payback that we had quoted in the ROI was around about 3.5 to 4 years. After that, everything that we generate was effectively going to be free. So a 3 to 4 year payback seemed pretty good to us. So that's when we started to get some quotes in.
And I wonder again, I asked Jonathan this question as well, but in terms of persuasion and making sure, because obviously you're not the only person who makes a decision there, was it easy to get people to get buy-in for this? Did people sort of say, oh yeah, this makes sense,
Yeah, it was a fairly easy decision. I've got a very, very small team, so I will always tap into the team around me to get their advice. We've done all the normal stuff. We put LED lights and PIR sensors. We've even got vehicle charging points. We've even got a company e-bike, which we allow our staff to try to commute into work each day before they have the expense of an e-bike. So we've done some really easy, quick wins, which didn't cost an awful amount. But really, it was it was an easy decision for the board. Once we have those charts in front of us and it shows, energy is being so unstable, unpredictable. If we don't have energy and metal is the two things that I don't want to run out of. So it was a very easy decision.
Yeah, thank you. Jonathan, if I could just return to you for a sec. I'd be interested to know, the process you went through. Obviously, you've talked about, the energy audit and that sort of thing. But when you got to the feasibility stage, what was your experience of that like?
The feasibility in terms of our data, we could get all of the half-hour data downloaded, so the team and our brokers could look at all of that and give us, using the models that are out there, give us a very good steer in terms of return on investment and payback. And again, with the prices where they've been, and as you say, we're just dependent on electricity to educate our children, having our own supply and potentially a return on investment in 4 to 5 years maybe. That was attractive. I mean, the technical stuff around then, once you get beyond the feasibility and looking at roofs and talking to the local suppliers, is the next stage really.
And how and do you mind if I ask, how that? Because in the end, you have to choose a supplier. So, what are the factors that are, that bear on that when you're making that decision?
We came down to 2 suppliers. One was where we were going to source where they were going to source the panels from, and Solar Sense came up with a Korean brand rather than another brand that may remain anonymous. And also we were looking at the longer term operational costs in terms of support from our suppliers, because we find we could put a big capital investment in, but then if it costs a lot to maintain and be confident that those suppliers are going to be around to maintain those things. So again, it was a confidence around the suppliers that we eventually chose.
Yeah. So let's turn to one of those suppliers now, Ollie, Ollie Fowler, who's head of technical and project delivery at Solar Sense, as I said in the introduction. Ollie, thank you very much for being here this morning. We've heard there from 2 clients, two users, end users, as it were, about their experience. But from the installer's point of view, what are the preparatory steps that you'd suggest businesses or organizations should take?
So, as Karen and Jonathan could probably vouch for, essentially we allow our customers to be led by our team. So our energy consultants will generally take the lead here. So there's really minimal for our customers to do, but like Karen and Jonathan both did, they've done a little bit of research into their half-hourly data, the locations of where they like their solar panels, because obviously this is down to the customer, how they would like their property to look. And then also a budget is obviously quite a key area when deciding on the size of the system. And then, of course, to add to that is any future additions. So, for instance, the current half-hourly data might be sort of one scope of data for the current or the previous year. However, as customers are moving forward and electric vehicles are becoming a bigger thing, that electrical demand and requirement might improve and will increase. So if you've got an idea of, potentially we will be adding 5 or 6 electric vehicle points, this obviously helps as well. So with all this data and this information, this can go to our design team, who can then design a bespoke system for our customers with the best possible return of investment.
Yeah, and Ollie, I'm wondering, when a customer comes to you, and obviously they've done, and let's assume they have done some research and they've done their half-hourly data and that sort of thing. But obviously you're experts at this. You've done hundreds of these installations, and for the client, chances are it's their first, and they're new to the whole thing, and they're, so presumably there is a bit of hand-holding, and you're going to give some advice, and perhaps they have, some of their assumptions might not be quite correct, and do you find that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where our energy consultants and their experience within the field really comes into play. People like Tim, who's been, I think it was a big part of the project, particularly with Jonathan's at King's School. He would provide advice. And we've also provided a dedicated designer for each customer. So that should go hand in hand with our consultants who, like I said, create a bespoke system for our customer. And obviously, like I said, the most important item for most of our customers is the return of investment. So once that's designed, we then, as you mentioned, we provide an outlook and an idea to our customers, and then we invite them to join what we call the feasibility process, as you just previously mentioned. So within this process, we kind of look into or ascertain whether the installation is actually proceedable. And so within this process, we look at items such as the roof structure. Obviously, a solar installation will add additional weight to the roof. So we need to make sure that the infrastructure is adequate for taking the additional weight and any potential snow loading and uplifts. We then got DNO. So this is where we apply to the local network operator. Depending on your area, this could vary. Around here in Somerset, it's mostly National Grid. Other areas, it could be SSE, UK Power Networks, whoever, but we ask them whether we can connect our customers' future installation to the grid. Generally, this is met with either a yes, you can, but you've got to limit what you can export to the grid because their infrastructure is only capable of withstanding a certain amount, or very, very rarely they'll say, no, you can't, but you can only put a certain size system. So obviously this is a vital part of the feasibility process. We then got planning permission. So in Wales, this is exempt, but in England, any system over 50 kilowatts, which quite a lot of our commercial systems are, we need to apply for planning permission. Also, if it's a listed building or in a served area of any way. We then use one of our expert teams to conduct an electrical survey. This will ascertain whether the current electrical infrastructure is adequate for the additional connections that would be brought in by the PV. And then something that we've introduced as well is drone footage. So during the feasibility process, one of our design team come around with a drone. And when it comes into its own is we use the images to scale the roof and actually take real life information off the roof so that we are aware of any obstructions or any items which can implement the design of the PV system. It's also quite nice because our customer gets a nice video of their roof before the installation as well. And like I said, during this feasibility process, you've got a dedicated energy consultant designated a member of the design team who can guide and help our customers through the process and really provide them with a insight of what their PV system is going to look like, how it's going to work, what it's going to produce, and how that system is going to take place during installation.
Right, thanks, Ollie. That was a very comprehensive answer. Tim, I was going to turn to you next, and I am going to turn to you, especially as Ollie bigged you up so nicely there. I was going to ask you what happens after the initial inquiry. Obviously, Ollie has answered quite a lot of that already.
Yep.
But tell, from your point of view at TDC Renewables, talk me through the process of what happens following that initial inquiry.
So yeah, I think I won't go over everything that Ollie's just done so expertly, but that is essentially what I'm here to, and other colleagues like me. So we will hold your hand through this process. It's a case of extracting the information, as Jonathan's identified, and Karen, what they now know about their business, the half-hourly data ideally, and then we go away and we come up with these kind of various different options and models for them. And I think Jonathan was just saying prior to our meeting here today, the good news is that normally our models are relatively pessimistic rather than optimistic. So hopefully what you actually see in reality is at least as good as we're expecting it to be. And we will look at what is the generation versus the consumption, which is one of the most critical things. I guess the only 2 points that I would pick up is, first of all, even if you are using all of the electricity on site, which a lot of companies think that they will, you still do need permission from the grid to do that. So I think a misconception that we often come across is, well, you just buy a solar system and put it on the roof. Well, it isn't as simple as that, as has just been explained through Ollie. So it is important you do all of those steps. And that's one of the great things that we offer with SolarSense to be able to offer this feasibility, is that you can do those steps relatively risk-free. You haven't yet committed to £200,000, £300,000, £400,000 worth of capital investment. You're only doing a very small, £3,000, £4,000, £5,000, £6,000 worth of feasibility study. And then once you've got the answers back to all of that, you're then in a situation where you can press go on the project. But I think we will hold the client's hand through that whole process, and they can be as involved or as distant from it as they choose, really. But I would just say the more information that we've got to start off with, the better the results are going to be at the end. So as everybody has been saying, the more you know about what your future growth in energy demand may be, that's all very helpful.
Ollie, if I could just come back to you quickly, talk to me about timescale. How long can it take? From the customer first making an inquiry.
So generally, the longest wait is the DNO currently. I think the DNO are quite fluctuated with quantity of work. So generally, this is about a 3-month period for feasibility for DNO and planning permission. But I mean, we have had some back within 2 months, so it's completely dependent on the timescales of receiving the DNO approval or the planning. So that's it really. And then once the feasibility is completed, our schedule is booked up for about a month currently. But we're building our teams. We're looking to create more teams in-house and also our supply chain. So like I said, we're looking to keep the waiting time at a minimum for our customers, because we know once they commit, they're quite keen on having the installed, and quite rightly so, to obviously bring their return of investment starting early.
Yeah, of course. And Tim, talking of return on investment, let's talk a little bit about the finance options. What stage would you normally consider those?
I think it's something we consider very early on. So how we would normally perceive this is that a client would come to us, express an interest. We would initially come back quite quickly as the first offer, as a budget estimate from what we can see from Google Earth and from the desktop information that's been provided. We think your system's going to be about this size, cost about this, save you about Y, and therefore your return on investment is whatever it is, 4 or 5 years, depending on obviously on the situation. And at that stage, it would be prudent to have the conversation over finance. A lot of clients are not wanting to spend their own capital at this point, and to actually keep that separate and to be able to asset finance the project is a really popular way of going about it. There's a number of companies that we work with, but Smarties in particular, who offer just excellent rates and are very easy to work with. They can make an offer within sort of 72 hours. They can do 100% asset finance on the project, normally structured over a 5 to 7 year period, which means that they're always seeing a cash flow positive situation. And of course, as soon as the finance is then solved, paid off, they're then reaping the whole benefit of the system because they don't have the loan outgoings anymore. They do also have the option of a power purchase agreement, which is an alternative. And that's if the company, for whatever reason, really didn't want to take out any borrowings and didn't have the funds themselves to do it. If the system is of a certain size and it needs to be a minimum of about £200,000, 250 kilowatt system, then we can work with third-party investors to pay to put the solar system on the roof. And then instead of paying for the system in the first place, you just pay per unit for the energy of electricity that is generated by the solar system. It does have a few more legal complexities. It does mean that you've effectively got a lease associated with the solar panels on the roof of your building, but it is a really nice way of just reducing costs, because you may well get a power purchase agreement at half the cost that you're currently buying from the grid, but with absolutely zero risk to you as the tenant. So it's an option to be considered, but the best return on investment is either capital investment yourself, whereas we're saying we're looking at 4 or 5 year payback, or looking at 100% asset finance, where you're going to be cash flow positive in 5 to 7 years.
Yeah, that's very interesting that there are so many different options. Karen, could I come back to you now, please, and talk about finance a bit, because obviously you guys must have had to make some decisions around finance when you went ahead with the project.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So we installed eventually, as you can see, we've packed our roof out. We're a high intense user. We've got power presses, we've got laser cutting machines, welders, press brakes. So actually, we're consuming quite a lot. We needed every area, every square centimeter on the roof to actually generate what we need at our peak times. So it's always important to balance your usage with the system. There's little point in having it maxed out if actually you're only using 25% of it, because the export tariff is very, very tiny. So we've just finally agreed an export tariff back to the national grid, and that's if you can export it back, of only about 5p a kilowatt. So it is pretty rubbish. So you want to basically just really balance your usage with your the system that you have. But basically the funding for us, we funded 50% ourselves, and went to a well-known bank to fund the other 50%. The challenges for us, which we had once we started the journey, is they needed to physically have the assets as the asset finance element. So 50% of the goods needed to be uplifted. Basically, if we didn't return the loans, they wanted to basically be able to lift up the assets and take it away. So we had to give them every single serial number of every single panel, and we had about 670 panels installed. So that was a lot of serial numbers we had to give them, plus the inverters and all the infrastructure and the roof connections. So yeah, just be aware that that's what you need before you go back to the bank, because they do sometimes, they're a bit nervous about funding solar, but now we've gone through that pain. Just look out for the pitfalls of making sure that you've got all the details of the equipment that they need. But after that, it was plain sailing.
Yeah, that's interesting. You said they were a bit nervous about it and taking all the serial numbers and all that sort of thing. The idea of them carting away all those solar panels seems a bit unlikely, but there you go. Tim, are banks getting better about this sort of thing? Are they getting more used to funding these things now?
They are, although, what Karen expressed, yes, that's something we come across a lot. And so luckily for us, there is computerized solutions for that. So when we get delivered the panels, if we know that we're going to have an asset finance, then we get a big spreadsheet with them all on. If we don't know, that's when the trouble comes. But I think in essence, the asset finance companies that we would tend to introduce you to, or are more set up for that kind of situation, so they're not scared by it and they do understand it. But sometimes, yes, your main high street bank just takes a little bit of coercing.
Yeah. Ollie, could I come back to you now? So we've talked about finance, we've talked about feasibility studies and all those sorts of things, and getting planning permission and all the stuff that has to happen before you do anything, before you actually start putting things on your building. So what happens once all that is done? In other words, what's the next step once you've cleared all those administrative hurdles, if you like, and you've got the finance in place?
Yeah, so once like you said, once we got all that information gathered, our customer's initial estimate will be revisited, taking into account all the information and data gathered during the feasibility process. And our customers will be provided with a final design and a final quotation for them to peruse and hopefully uptake. And then we ask for a deposit. So once the deposit's received, the pre-construction period can begin with ordering materials. We procure all the materials, arrange for that to be ordered and sent to ourselves in whatever way we require. And then our customer will be dedicated a project manager. So the project manager will just go over the final fundamentals with each one of our customers. So it usually it takes place on site. So they'll visit site and they'll go over items such as scaffolding location, cable runs, delivery times. And even though these things have probably been visited before, it's just to dot the I's and cross the T's as such, and make sure that the customer is fully aware of the installation process and what everything's going to look like within their building, because obviously our customer's got a right to know how the installation is going to go and what it's going to look like. And then we basically schedule an installation date for the customer which suits them best, and generally within 2 or 3 weeks, depending on the size of the installation, we're usually on site installing, and we're then at a commissioning stage where we get the system up and running. Now that does sound like a quite straightforward. Sometimes we do have DNA witness tests and things like that, where this is basically where the DNA wants to just come and witness our connection to the grid, just to make sure that they're happy with how we're set up and that we've adhered to any constraints that they've asked us to adhere to, such as, like I said, with managing any export should that be required. But yeah, generally, I'm hoping Jonathan and Karen could probably advise, because they've both been customers of mine, that it's generally quite a streamlined process.
So Jonathan, as you were mentioned there, let's just turn to you quickly. You obviously, Ollie talked about things like the siting of scaffolding and all this sort of stuff, all these little nuts and bolts that have to happen to build anything, as well as obviously a solar installation. Did you find it disruptive, or was it fairly smooth? I mean, did it disrupt the life of the school when you were doing this?
No, I mean, we prioritise the work during the summer holidays, but even in the summer holidays, we still have pupils and kids clubs on site. So, an early meeting with Ollie in terms of setting out our expectations in terms of how the contractors get on site, how they sign themselves in, how we, meet our sort of safeguarding requirements, was very important. We're a big site, so we were able to, give them some dedicated space, because when these things arrive, they arrive on some very big lorries, and the challenge then is to store the stuff before it gets up. But I mean, once they got into a routine, the lads were good, and there was no issues with sort of interaction with pupils, parents, etc. And it moved forward smoothly. There's a couple of wrinkles post-event in terms of, you've obviously now got a big solar array on your roof, and what do you do about lightning conductors and things like that? So we did some work with that, and also the fire brigade have been very interested in them since the panels were on site and how those are isolated. So there are a couple of wrinkles post completion that you have to keep an eye out for.
Yeah, and Karen, did you again, same question to you really, was the actual process reasonably smooth? I mean, I guess you don't get a long summer holiday, if I can be facetious, but did it disrupt things, or was it all fairly straightforward?
No, it was fairly straightforward. As you can see, we've got a relatively large car park, so we just cordoned off an area. Obviously there was a couple of access to the roof. And once they were up there, other than it sounding like some fairy elephants on the roof, it was absolutely fine. I think what was important for us as well is to make sure you're communicating with your insurer as well. So yeah, fire is obviously a big risk, which obviously is you're now adding something, and obviously you're adding something of value to your business or premises. But we had to inform our insurers fairly swiftly, and they wanted to see all the maintenance schedules and OEM manuals. So that's things to consider post installation as well.
Yeah.
But as for the install itself, it was fairly straightforward. Although I wanted to get on the app and see what it was generating as quick as possible.
Yeah, and we're going to come to that in a minute, the business of the app, because Ollie, I know, we want to talk a little bit about what happens once the system's installed, up and running. So tell me about that from your point of view, and then perhaps we'll go back to Karen and talk to her about it too.
Yeah, so once the system's installed and up and running, our on-site team will generally do a run through with the customer. Now, admittedly, sometimes the customer that really wants to hear this isn't there. So what we've introduced now is also a bespoke handover pack, which is a handover pack explaining the different items of equipment actually within our customer's installation. So this advises them of areas of isolation and things like that. But you'll also, then a customer will also receive their completion pack, their O&Ms, as Karen's just mentioned, which is part of the handover process, and their as-built drawings and any installation and commissioning certificates, basically. So we can then also retrospectively pass them on to our after-sales team, who can provide details of a service plan that could be offered. And that's down to our customer whether they wish to update that with us or with whoever they deem suitable, but hopefully it's with us, given the service that we've provided. And then I think we'll probably go into this in a minute, but we also provide our customers with online monitoring. So this gives our customers the capability to be able to see what they're generating, essentially. And like Karen mentioned, the return on investment is based mostly about how you use your energy as opposed to exporting it. So we've got certain customers that have changed shift patterns and things like that to really utilize the energy that's produced, especially during the summer. So for instance, I think in the summer they're introducing Saturday working, they've seen that the return on investment is that good on the generation that actually shifts can change to increase or improve that return on investment period.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And Karen, talk to me about your, once it's all up and running, and Ollie's explained to us, about the handover and that sort of thing. So what was your experience of that and this app? I'm very interested in this app and how you can monitor your energy usage and how that influences the operation of the organization. You're muted, Karen.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. In our business, the data is so important, and even post installation, it's still important to see where all the peaks and the troughs are, because we can, as Ollie mentioned, change our shift patterns. So before we had solar, we were trying to turn everything off at weekends, including the compressors. And now actually we are looking about putting the weekend shifts back on rather than going through the night. But let me share my screen if I may. This is a typical day in, it's actually a couple of weeks ago, 19th of February. And if you can see, this is a Sunday going into a Monday. So you can see a very, very low usage from Sunday overnight. You can absolutely tell when we start coming in the morning. So 6:30 is when we start to see the usage where the compressors are turned on, the lights are turned on, and all the machines are turned on. So red is our consumption, and blue is obviously our generation from the roof. So obviously this being in February, we had a very wet February, so this wasn't too bad. This was a good day in February. But you can see that we're generating, and obviously we peaked out about midday. The green bit is actually, don't get too excited, we're exporting back to the grid and we're generating everything that we need for a very short period of time. Now in the summer, I'm hoping that to be much, much better. So for the large part of the day in the summer months, I'm hoping to be completely self-sufficient and maybe exporting and generating maybe 50 quid or so here and there to you know, keep us going. So that's a wrap. I have to admit, turned into a bit of a nerd watching this because it's actually quite exciting knowing that you're being self-sufficient and you know, you are doing good for the environment. You know what, we're sharing this now with customers and actually sharing our journey with them because we're educating them along this route. And it doesn't defy belief that in a minute I'm going to be needing to quote my products in pounds and in carbon. They're going to want to know if they're buying products from me, how much it costs and how much carbon it takes for us to make it. So, you know, we're now starting, we've done our scopes 1 and 2, we're starting to measure our scopes 3, which is a massive, massive journey. And it's the biggest part of your equivalent carbon that you're using. But we're measuring that and actually trying to share that with customers. So actually it's making us a more positive, attractive supplier for winning new contracts.
Yeah, and I suppose it's a good thing if we're distracted a little bit from Instagram and Twitter and things by something useful like an app that's measuring energy. I mean, but seriously, that I mean, it was very interesting seeing that chart there. You know, and as you say, that's going to change presumably throughout the year. It'll be fascinating to compare that, you know, in August or something like that, won't it?
I'm hoping so. And we are trying to collect, you know, under advice from SolarSense, going to collect a whole year's worth of data before we even contemplate battery storage. I'm hoping battery storage is not going to take up too much space in the factory and the technology is moving on. But at the same time, you know, it may return, it may not return, but we want a good clear run of every season to be able to, you know, decide whether that's another worthy investment and return on investment. But also don't underestimate the power of the good feeling that you give to the rest of the team, that we are generating our own electricity. We're already on a green tariff anyway. So without this solar, we'd already halved our scopes 1 and 2. We now think, you know, we're well on our way to, you know, being pretty self-sufficient.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And Jonathan, you know, in terms of the experience, your experience with the school, you know, post, you know, once the panels are up and running, and I guess you have an app like that as well, and you can look at the energy usage. So, what has it meant for the school, and has that been important for the parents and the governors and things?
Yeah, I mean, the work we did with Ollie in the feasibility studies paid off, and I think, you know, as Karen showed on that slide, I think we're already producing a third of our power even in the winter, you know, in end of February, early March, and that was a goal for the overall for the year. The governors got excited about batteries as well, you know, especially over the summer when there's not a lot of children in. But we could have filled the school with batteries, but then come September when the pupils come back, we wouldn't have any room for the children, which would defeat the object really. So the other area the lads left us some panels that got a bit wet and damaged on the weeks of installation, and we've been using those in our physics department. So we've set up a few experiments for the pupils now just to show how a panel works, and we're also using them out in our wooded area where we've got some pumps that, you know, aerate the ponds. So all of that is, you know, something where the pupils can actually see the panels working on a day-to-day basis. So I don't really want to take them up on the roof. You know, the health and safety and, you know, and all of that just beggars belief. So having these extra panels that they can wire up, demonstrate how the systems work is really important, especially for the older pupils, where it's so important when university degrees, where, you know, a lot of sustainability is now built into the syllabuses.
Yeah, that's so interesting that it actually has become a learning opportunity at the school. I mean, that's something perhaps I wouldn't have thought of. But Ashley, if I could ask you about what happens next. So, you know, you've gone down this route, you've installed these fantastic panels on the roof, and you're looking at your app and you're feeling, oh, this is great. We're saving money here, and we're, you know, and all this sort of thing. But what's the next step in terms of the sustainability journey? Because, you know, presumably it's kind of, we're all on this road, and we shouldn't sort of just sit back and think, oh, well, I've done that, sorted.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's the easy bit's done. I think the hard bits after, I think Karen alluded to that. I think you can your electricity consumption is within your control. So the solar panels is an easy option. It is a logical option. It is one of the first steps to do, alongside, like everybody's echoed, how important data is, culture and behavior. But scope 3, then looking at your value chain, it's then the hard bit. You are influencing people. You're doing things that are outside of your actual control. So that's how you buy things that the operation needs, how you influence your staff and your other stakeholders to buy into this vision and to do things differently, because you need them in order to really excel in reducing your carbon emissions. So I think that is when the really hard work starts, and that is again why it's so important to be transparent and robust and have good data behind you that links into your story and say, look, this is what we're doing, this is where we are, we've done all we can, we understand that this is what we can do, but this is where we're going now. And it's about influence. And I think, again, the more people, organizations will do that, the better they will be commercially, because there are so many larger organizations now that it's become legislation that they have to measure their carbon footprint, they have to disclose their emissions within their accounts, or tender opportunities, whether that's public procurement over a certain threshold. They expect these people that are bidding for these jobs to have carbon reduction plans in place. It's not just about saying we're sustainable and look, we've got solar panels. It's more than that. It's about creating this whole understanding of what sustainability and carbon reduction means within the whole organization. So I think that's where the real work then starts. Personally, that's my view, and I think that's where real traction can be made and real benefits throughout. And I think, again, we'll talk about people, human element is so important. And I think, again, by engaging with sustainability, bringing that into the core of your business, your staff will be more engaged, because there will be people that you don't realize that absolutely care about this stuff. So not only will they be more engaged with the journey, but they'll be like, well, I work for a fantastic company and I want to do more. So I think there's that whole piece to it as well.
Thank you. Tim, I want to bring you back in now, because I'd like to talk a little bit about the sort of future of solar and where it's going next. What are the technological developments and that sort of thing that we should be looking out for, and so what's next, really?
Certainly. Well, I guess over the last few years, and it's still going, is that the technology is improving. Whereas 10 years ago, when I started, we were looking at 240 watt panels. They're now on average 440 watt panels. So it's a massive difference in the capacity. They're fractionally bigger, but really it's the growth in their yield, and they work much better in the lower light conditions that we get here in the UK. But I think we started to talk earlier, Karen and Jonathan, about matching the time of use with your generation. There's quite a lot of smart controls out there that will help to not just understand your half-hourly data, which is what your whole factory is doing, but also independent devices. So if you've got blast freezers, chillers, air conditioning units, heating, hot water demand, all of those things, you can actually control them automatically, independently, by a computer system that will say, I've got a little bit of extra solar generation right now, I'm going to turn on a hot water heater, or I'm going to make a chiller extra cold, or I'm going to, whatever it happens to be. And equally, the grid needs to, or is becoming more flexible, and needs companies to be more flexible in their usage. And they will be benefits for doing so, because the likelihood is that more and more people will be on flexible rate tariffs that mean that at different times of day, there are much more carbon intense periods in the grid. So when everybody comes home at 4 till 7 at night is a really expensive time for electricity, but it's also a very carbon intensive time. So if in those periods you as a business could go to battery storage or could turn down your freezers or turn off your hot water heaters. All of those things will help you save money, but also save carbon. And part of that will be these smart controls. And the other part, potentially, as Karen mentioned, is having some battery storage there to fall back on. But it is absolutely essential that we have a good amount of data to go on before we start speccing batteries, because they're really still very expensive. And yeah, it would be, you could very easily get the wrong size battery.
Yeah, and the battery, I'm presuming the battery technology is improving, and hopefully costs will reduce over time.
Yeah, I mean, they have reduced, and yes, they are improving. I think there's still some way to go, but it's the return on investment tends not to become any better, generally speaking, with a battery and solar system as opposed to just a solar system. So it's almost, you do the solar system first, and then you think about what size battery you want to fit second, and that's then for these flexibility services, and you can get paid, as I said, from the grid for doing that, and that helps to make the payback.
Yeah. And I mentioned in the introduction carports as well, so it would be remiss of me not to ask you if that's a growing thing or if it's a feasible thing for some companies.
Yeah, I mean, I picked up on when we were talking about EVs earlier, and I think the growth in EV is undeniable, that is a journey that so many people are now going on. And so to have EV chargers at your place of work or at the business is becoming more and more commonplace. And another great thing about having solar and having maybe these smart controls in place, that it can go, instead of exporting solar, I've got some EVs plugged in, I'm going to dump that solar into the EVs, and that's exactly what happens for myself at home. But on a bigger commercial scale, that can work very well. But also there's a movement to look at solar carports. So that's where we've got a carport frame with the solar panels on the roof. There is never an opportunity to produce enough solar on those carports to charge the cars. So it is always connected back to the main building, and it is twice the price generally than a normal roof-mounted solar. So it's always a next step rather than a first step, is that you would always do the roof-mounted solar first and then expand your system by putting in a solar carport if you wanted to. And it also makes a really nice welcome piece for clients and for visitors to your site. It's very obvious what you're trying to do, whereas the roof-mounted ones, I guess, is less obvious.
Well, thank you all for fantastic contributions. Well, before we finish, I want to just bring, we've had quite a lot of questions have come in during the webinar, so I want to ask you a few of those. And Ollie, quick question to you that's come in about the cleaning of solar panels, which I suppose seems a bit mundane, but it's important, isn't it, I guess? Do you have to clean them? And if so, how often? And what happens if it snows?
Well, yeah, so it depends on location and environmental factors. So generally, with us in the UK, we get quite a lot of rain, as we've noticed over the last 6 months. So most of the time, these solar panels are pretty much self-cleaning. The cleaning factor pretty much looks after itself. However, if you are in an area where I don't know, perhaps by the sea or in an area of predominant dust, then yeah, cleaning will obviously improve the performance of the solar panels. But the amount of times or the different the intensity of the cleaning will depend on like I said, environmental factors. But we've got a couple of panel cleaning companies that we can recommend. But quite a lot of our customers are quite hands-on, and it might be as simple as hiring a cherry picker for the day and using a long reach brush and cleaning them that way. So it's really not a lot of upkeep, if I'm honest. Like I said, the rain looks after most of that for us here in England.
Okay, Jonathan, have you had to get up on the roof with a mop yet?
No, but I know a couple of lads who have. And I mean, lucky for us, we've got power pits around the building, and the keep safe system. So our caretakers are perfectly able to clean them themselves, and that was one of the savings we had compared to some of the other suppliers who were trying to sell us more of a sort of service. Our biggest issue is the kids kick the footballs up there, so we've got to get the footballs as well at the same time.
And Karen, what about your experience so far? I don't know if you've had any snow since you put them on, but have you had any issues? I presume it's early days.
It doesn't snow in sunny Devon. No, we haven't had any snow. We do, obviously, you do have to be wary of birds leaving certain gifts. But you know, over the big area that we've got, we're fortunate because obviously we've got a drone. We have access to a drone, so actually you can easily fly it up there and have a look to see if there's anything that's not looking normal. But no, we've got a maintenance team here on site, so you know, we've scheduled it in. At least certainly for the first year, a check in 1 year, and then obviously we'll probably extend that out to every 2 years after that. Of course, that the insurance also need to know what you're doing about the maintenance of it, because the fire risk is all about the cables and birds pecking at cables. So obviously, yeah, they want to know that you're checking it and routinely looking after it and lowering that risk assessment.
Yeah. Tim, obviously we've stumbled into the area of ongoing maintenance now, not which presumably isn't just about cleaning or that sort of thing, or birds leaving gifts, as Karen so beautifully put it. What are the ongoing maintenance issues, if any, you know, that your clients would be thinking about, you know, going forward?
Well, just picking up on the bird one, yeah, I mean, that one is quite a common one. And actually, if it does become a problem, or if we know that there's birds in the area, we can actually put bird spikes and bird prevention measures to stop them from being able to get underneath and build nests, which is a consideration. But yeah, we would normally recommend that you have a yearly health check. So that would involve an engineer coming to site, doing an electrical test, and they will check the resistance on all of the strings basically, and if there was a resistance fault, then we know where to go on the roof to try and check that out. And it could be that there is a loose or a faulty MC4 connector between the panels, or something that just needs further investigation. But it is always good just to have these annual health checks, we call them. But generally speaking, a solar system is quite a maintenance-free item. It isn't something that, you know, you have to spend thousands of pounds a year having everything serviced in great detail. But it is important that you have these regular health checks.
And lifespan of a typical system?
So most warranties of panels are a minimum of 15 years as a product warranty, and they're expected to have a degradation over time, but only sort of 0.5% per year. So in 25, 30 years plus is their normal power output warranty. So we're talking about a long-term investment here. And the inverters themselves tend to come with a typical 5 or 10-year warranty. They are, most of them, expected to last about 15 years. So in the whole 25, 30-year lifespan of a system, we think about having to change the inverters once.
I've got a question on my screen here from somebody asking about the half-hourly data that we talked about at the beginning of the webinar, and wondering why half-hourly data is so valuable compared to perhaps a lump sum, you know, of the annual consumption of electricity. Are you able to address that one, Tim?
Yeah, I guess it really comes down to Karen's graph. So if we just know that you use 1,000 units in a month, but we don't know when those units are being used, bearing in mind a solar system and your savings are calculated in real time, if you used all those 1,000 units but on one day, the solar system isn't going to touch the surface of it. And if it was used every day and it was consistently and followed the nice arc of the sun, then of course it's going to use all of it. So it just gives us that granular detail that we need to understand where your consumption is in relation to when the solar system will be generating power, because it isn't just I've generated 100 kilowatts, I use 100 kilowatts in a month, therefore I don't have an electricity bill. That is not the case. It is only in real time. If I'm using electricity at the same time as it's being generated, brilliant. If I don't, it will be exported to the grid and I'm only going to be earning 5p for it.
Ashley, could I just come to you again? I'll get your view on the business of batteries as well, because we're getting a lot of questions about batteries. And obviously Tim and Ollie have both addressed that, and and Karen and Jonathan have talked about batteries as well. But you know, what's your, you know, looking at as a consultant, as an expert on this area, where do you think we're going to be, say, in 5, 10 years in terms of battery storage and affordability, that sort of thing?
I think first of all, I'm not necessarily an expert in batteries, so but I think my view is certainly like I think what everybody else has said is to echo in terms of technologies evolving all the time. So I think again, what I said at the start, in order to have a sustainable energy network and to meet the government's 2050 net zero target, we have to change the way we use energy. That is fundamental, and I think Tim touched on that earlier. And I think flexibility is going to play a massive part. We can only be flexible in our energy usage if we have the assets in order to do it. So I think that as we go further on, into the future, there will be technologies, whether it's large scale commercial batteries, small batteries for homes, but there will be these technologies that will enable people to not pull from the grid and be able to use energy at different times, because else our current infrastructure would not be able to cope with the electrification of vehicles, decarbonisation of heat. It just wouldn't happen. So I think they're definitely the steps that will have to come into play in order for us to decarbonise the way we certainly use energy.
Okay, well, look, thank you very much. We could obviously go on and talk about this for hours and hours because it's such a fascinating topic and there is so much to it. But sadly, we've run out of time. But thank you all for joining us on this Solar Sense webinar on everything you need to know as you consider the switch to solar. A big thank you to our expert panel, Tim Cook from TDC Renewables, Ollie Fowler from Solar Sense, Karen Friendship from Alderman Tooling, Jonathan Spencer Pickup from King's School in Macclesfield, and of course, Ashley Webber from Balanced Energy. We hope you've gained some valuable insight from our expert panel, but if we haven't managed to answer your particular question, please do get in touch with SolarSense via their website to get further information or to address specific queries. In the meantime, thanks for joining us and enjoy the rest of your day.